Hey guys, HackerSploit here, back again with another video. Welcome back to the Adversary Emulation series. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how to develop an adversary emulation plan. So in the previous two videos, we got an introduction to adversary emulation, and then we also took a look at APT groups. And you know, the reason as to why that's important, I already explained in those videos. So if you are new, definitely check the last two videos out. They're going to be in the red team playlist on the channel. But this video is going to be very important because in the next video, we're going to be getting started with the practical stuff. So we're actually going to be doing stuff in a lab on the CyberAngels platform. So the reason this is an important video within this series will become apparent. So let's not waste any more time. You know, what does developing an adversary emulation plan entail? Well, you know, generally speaking, when I introduced you to adversary emulation, I sort of explained what it is, what the objectives were. And, you know, with that being said, it sort of goes without saying that you need a plan, just like, you know, a pen test or a red team operation or engagement. So the first step in creating an adversary emulation plan is, of course, deciding which threat actor you'll be emulating. Now, if the organization that has contracted you to perform a red team operation, more specifically an adversary emulation campaign, has not, you know, given you an adversary to essentially emulate or want to use as a basis for your emulation, this specific technique will apply, or this process will apply. However, if you already know, generally speaking, what types of adversaries or APT groups, you know, you probably want to emulate based on the organization's geographic location or the sector or industry they operate in. So the bottom line is that regardless of whatever info you have regarding what APT group or adversary you're going to emulate, there's a couple of considerations that you need to keep in mind, right? So firstly, does the APT group or the actual adversary, do they target a specific industry? Do they target organizations in a specific geographical location? And more importantly, is there sufficient CTI, cyber threat intelligence, available on that specific APT group that can essentially be used to develop your adversary emulation plan, or I should say campaign? So is there enough TTP information on the TTPs, you know, that have been attributed to this particular group? And then I wouldn't say an added importance, or, you know, a consideration with added importance, and that is, you know, whether or not you have access to private CTI or commercial CTI. And this could either be provided by the organization, stuff like that. Now, to contextualize everything, let's say, you know, I've been hired to perform an adversary emulation campaign, or, you know, a red team operation for all intents and purposes, but the company has told me, hey, we're not going to give you any APT, or we don't really know what APT is likely to target us. Can you, based on where we are located geographically and based on what industry we operate in, can you identify threat actors that are, again, quite active or likely to target organizations like ours within geographic locations that we operate in? And that's one scenario, right? The other scenario is the organization is fairly experienced from a security perspective, and they tell you, hey, we want you to emulate APT29 based on these factors. So, you know, I was sort of making the point earlier, it doesn't really matter where you start or what info you have. These considerations are very, very important, or these are very important questions to be asking yourself. So one important note here is that, you know, the organization you're performing the adversary emulation campaign for may have closed source CTI from prior attacks. So if the organization is fairly mature from a security perspective, and actually they do have a blue team or a CTI department, they may have CTI or IOCs from previous attacks that they've encountered. And if that CTI is available to you and there is sufficient detail, or it is of sufficient detail that the threat actor would like, then you would essentially use that particular threat actor or the data from that particular attack, or from the organization itself, as part of your adversary emulation campaign. But of course, this is something that they would ask you to do or to consider. So let's start off by understanding how to find threat actors that are targeting a specific industry. So let's say the organization that you have been hired operates within the financial services or biotechnology industry. Well, what do you do? Well, the easiest starting point, and we'll go through this practically, is the most common or well-known CTI source, and that's the MITRE ATT&CK. More specifically, under the CTI section, there's going to be a section on groups. Right, so once you're in there, you can easily just perform a quick search on the web page and search for specific industries. So for example, as shown in this screenshot, if I look for biotechnology, these will give us groups that, this will give us adversaries or APT groups that target biotechnology organizations. Right, now this is not a fail-safe method or one that I would recommend. It's just a great starting point. So, on the MITRE ATT&CK group page, we can see a listing of many threat actors with a brief description related to their behaviors and targets, which is, again, exactly what we want to begin with, right? And then you can search for your industry on this page. So moving on, after you've identified a list of threat actors that target a specific industry, you can check to see which ones have targeted your geographic location. I'm speaking now, in the first person, but if you're performing this for an organization, then you'd find the threat actors that target, the organization's specific geographical location or region that they operate in. In the case of the slides, I've just used an example here of Bronze Butler that targets Japanese organizations, right? And as I covered in the previous video, I would highly recommend that you also use the additional resources referenced in the APT groups and operations spreadsheet, but also the spreadsheet itself. But there's also a couple of links or services and resources that are listed within that spreadsheet. If you're not familiar with this spreadsheet, take a look at the previous video, the one just before this one, if you're watching this series sequentially. So you can see in this case, I've sort of compiled 3 key bits of information, right? I've sort of highlighted the group's origin. So Bronze Butler, where is it from? China. That's from the APT groups and operations spreadsheet. I then, using the MITRE ATT&CK framework, identified right over here the toolset or malware that they are known to use. And then right over here, just an example of the attack kill chain that they typically follow in the operations, or what has been established. So, the initial access is obtained from an infected website where the targeted user, visits that website, and then a file is downloaded. There's, I wouldn't say a file, it's a payload that then, drops another backdoor Trojan, and then that initiates a connection to a command and control server. So, very, very basic. This is not actually specific to Bronze Butler, but quite important for you to understand. So we then move on to, selecting the threat actor or adversary to emulate. In this case, I know based on the example in the slides, I've sort of gone with Bronze Butler, but, you'd obviously assume that, depending on the geographic location that the company who's hired you operates in, or the industry they operate in, you're going to have, I would say, not a sizable list, but a list nonetheless, so more than one, right? And, based on the considerations I outlined in the first slide, you'd essentially filter through or trim your list of threat actors that, may be interested in targeting, the organization that you're performing the adversary emulation campaign for. And, you can then, based on the data you've collected up to this point, select the one that best serves your requirements or your needs. And that's sort of the most important, right? And I would say the most important criteria that you should be concerned with is how much CTI is available. So if you want to emulate an APT group successfully or quite thoroughly or rigorously, if you will, or I should say realistically, in the sense that the company that you're performing the adversary emulation campaign for actually gets a realistic understanding of what they're likely to face or what issues they currently have within, you know, the security of the infrastructure, you should essentially find an APT group or a threat actor that, again, you've essentially filtered, or you've gone through the process of selecting. But one key determining factor that I've seen is the amount of CTI that you have available. So if you don't know much about the group, but you know it falls within the list of groups that again meet your initial requirements, but there's not a lot known about that particular group, then you would obviously want to choose one that quite a bit of CTI is available on. So in this case, or for the sake of this example, we're going to assume that we do not have access to private CTI, so we'll only look for what is publicly available. And in this case, just following along with the example, we can examine the public or freely accessible CTI to start off. We can kick off by taking a look at what is directly available, and that's on the MITRE ATT&CK groups page. So when you click on a particular group, at the bottom you're going to have a set of references. That's again very basic, but this is the initial starting point. So in this case, the group Bronze Butler has a fair amount of publicly available CTI, and that there are many techniques listed for the group along with associated software. In such an instance, selecting a threat actor could be done either based on any of the other criteria relevant to the organization you're performing the campaign for, arbitrarily, or both could be emulated. So it's quite dynamic. The bottom line is it's all going to come down to what the organization has asked you to do, whether they have any specific requirements, stuff like this. And as I mentioned, you can find references in the references section for a particular group on the MITRE ATT&CK website. And then obviously you move on to selecting the TTPs to emulate. So I'm now, we're now assuming that you've selected the group you want to emulate. Now you need to select the TTPs. Luckily for us, in most cases, all groups cataloged or indexed on the MITRE ATT&CK website under the group section have an MITRE ATT&CK Navigator layer. If you're not familiar with the Attack Navigator, take a look at the video that introduces you to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, as well as the Navigator within this playlist, the Red Team playlist. It covers exactly how you can use the Navigator layer to map APT TTPs and also do a few more interesting or useful things, essentially how to operationalize it. So you'll be able to get the TTPs, but this is still not a plan. So touching specifically on the process of creating a plan, in general, an emulation plan should include most, if not all, of the post-compromise tactics, including initial access techniques. Can also add value to the emulation plan. But of course, if the organization tells you that, hey, we don't want you to do any initial compromise, just perform or emulate post-compromise TTPs, then you'd need to adapt accordingly. So very important to keep in mind. So this is an example of Bronze Butler, or the Bronze Butler TTPs on the MITRE ATT&CK Navigator, which we'll go through an example in a few seconds just to rehash your memory. And then of course we have the attack kill chain. Now this will require quite extensive analysis of the APT group you're trying to emulate, the campaigns or attacks that it has been involved in, and this is where very good CTI comes into play, because analysis papers performed on the group can be very insightful in giving you an understanding of when and how the threat group or adversary or APT group implements specific TTPs. So on the MITRE ATT&CK Navigator page, for a specific APT group, it just gives you a list of the TTPs, right? However, how do you know, or how do you tell which technique is executed first? Because you may see 3 or 4 initial access techniques that are, attributed to the group based on different campaigns. You need to tailor that. But then post-compromise, if you see like 3 privilege escalation techniques, you need to have an understanding of the typical sequence that they follow. And this is where the attack kill chain, this is where it comes into play. So while adversaries often follow a similar path of attack, there can be significant differences that set them apart from each other, obviously. And to emulate the adversary as closely as possible or as accurately as possible, we should try to determine the path of attack our chosen threat actor has been known to follow. Fortunately for us, there are often sources that report on, the attack path, and sometimes these are presented, in the form of clean visuals like so. In other times, you'll need to dig through the various CTI reports on the group and sort of put together a diagram. I always find that using an attack kill chain diagram, I find it to be quite useful in understanding, the different steps, what happens, so on and so forth. And then, of course, just the final step is converting the TTPs into an emulation plan. So there's a couple of important considerations here. Firstly, some tactics may be repeated within the attack path. For example, an adversary may perform remote discovery immediately following initial compromise to understand the network topology or to perform local enumeration on the network, right? They may then move on to performing local discovery to discover files of interest after lateral movement. And the result of this is that, it'll obviously, from your perspective, this will create some complexity in assigning techniques to the attack path or to understand the sequence, as I mentioned in the previous slide. But, this can be solved with additional considerations and research. It may also be appropriate to perform the same technique in multiple phases of the emulation, or you may see certain TTPs being used by the same group, but in different parts. So there's going to be an overlap. So this is very important because while the attack path is represented in a linear format, adversary behaviors are often cyclical, right? Adversary campaigns can be very lengthy, and it is expected behavior for adversaries to attempt to gather information through discovery, credential access, and collection for most, if not all, machines they gain access to throughout their campaign, which may, again, be followed by further lateral movement. So what does this mean? Let's say an APT group, let's take Bronze Butler. I'm not saying this is the case, but let's take it as an example. You may see that within discovery, they're using quite a few techniques. However, they may be using local enumeration or discovery techniques, that are different for one type of system. Let's say they've targeted an Active Directory domain. And for standard workstations, they may have one set of, local discovery, or not local discovery, but discovery or local enumeration techniques. But then when they move on to a domain controller, it changes up, obviously. And so you need to keep this in mind, right? Now, not all of the techniques that you found may fit neatly within the attack path that you've generated. And, that's perfectly fine. It is not vital to strictly follow the attack path. Some deviation is acceptable. And alternatively, if the technique does not fit neatly or logically in any part of the attack path, it may also be appropriate to leave it out entirely. So this comes now into some of the more advanced aspects of adversary emulation and, specific APT groups that, let's say, have quite a complex infrastructure. And let's say you don't want to emulate the infrastructure, the attack infrastructure, with that much complexity. So it's not going to be a one-to-one match. The key thing is that you emulate the known TTPs, right? And, if you're assuming a post-compromise scenario, you can begin your emulation after initial access. So you may not need to factor that in. Once you have the attack path developed, you can start fitting the techniques you've already gathered into this path. And so basically that's the process of developing a plan or an adversary emulation plan. Of course, we'll take a look at a fully fleshed out plan in the next video when we get started with the practical stuff, and we'll be taking a look at emulating FIN6. We'll go through, pretty much doing everything or emulating FIN6, and then we'll move on to a more advanced adversary like APT29. We'll also emulate it both manually and automatically, or we'll have two emulation plans. One will require us to do stuff like developing payloads manually, and the other will be automated. So this is going to be quite extensive. So I just want to go through a quick demo session here where I go through what I explained in the slides just to contextualize everything. So I'm going to switch over into my Kali Linux system, and I'll just see you guys there. All right, so I'm back on my Kali Linux system, and I've just come up with a quick exercise of what you typically expect. So, an organization could tell you, hey, or the organization you're performing the red team op or adversary emulation campaign for operates in the financial sector, and they currently reside in North America. So we're supposed to use this information to identify threat actors that target organizations within North America, but more importantly, target financial or organizations or companies within the financial sector. So we have two criteria. So starting point, as I mentioned, is the attack website or the MITRE ATT&CK website here. Under CTI, you head over into groups, and you can begin your basic search here. Now, as I said, this is not I would not recommend just using the attack website and just selecting APT groups that way or adversaries that way. But we start here. So I'm going to say North America to find groups, and in this case, the first match is APT 39. But we can see that their objectives or the target organizations are really not what we want. In that, you can see that they've targeted travel, hospitality, academic, and telecommunications industries in Iran, and also North America, as well as, I would say, pretty much all the continents, or most of the continents. So let's go to the next one here. We have Fin10, which, based on the previous video where I introduced you to APT groups, Fin, the abbreviation Fin means it is a financially motivated group, right? And this one looks like a good match, because you can see it's a Fin group, so financially motivated threat group that has targeted organizations in North America since at least 2013 to 2016. So it may not be relevant in this particular case, but we can keep on. We also have Fox Kitten, which is Iranian, not really, doesn't really target organizations within, the industry that, we were specified in the case of this example. So we can proceed to the next one. We have this one right over here. No financial, nothing in the financial sector there. We have Muddy Water, nothing here. Let's go to the next one. We have Play. This is a ransomware group. Okay, so you can see we've been able to find quite a few, but none of them meets both our criteria except Fin10. But let's try and turn this. Let's try and search for the sector first. So right over here, we have quite a few. And there we are. We have the Fin groups here. We can actually take a look at Fin6, given that that's the one we're going to emulate. You can see right over here, it says Fin6 is a cybercrime group that has stolen payment card data and sold it for profit on underground marketplaces. So if the organization that you're performing the campaign for, does perform, or, does store, card data and stuff like this, that could be another way of, fine-tuning your list. So when you click on a group, again, just as an example, you can see the associated groups. So Mage Card Group 6, Skeleton Spider, and then you can take a look at the techniques used. So right over here, you would have the attack navigator layer for the group that lists out all the TTPs, that are known or have been attributed to this particular group. We'll give that a few seconds, and you can scroll down. Right over here, you have the software that they use and the techniques that it has been used for. So AD find, quite common. We'll actually be taking a look at that. So, or how to utilize AD find when we'll be emulating Fin6. Cobalt Strike, that seems to be their primary C2. Grim Agent, Mimikatz, obviously. And then right over here, you have references. And this is the best starting point for CTI, or for you to understand, the attack kill chain, for example. So, right over here, we have some, I would say, quite useful vendors or reports by vendors like FireEye. I'm not sure that's working. Okay, no problem there. We can also try a couple of these others, like this one. That's a CrowdStrike Global Threat Report, so probably not relevant or specific to that. Let's try and open up this one here. That's FireEye as well. And these are essentially the starting points right over here in attack. Let me open up the layer control. Sorry, 1 second. Right over here, I'm just going to collapse them all. So these are the known TTPs. You can see initial access, they start off with valid accounts. Command and scripting interpreter, they use JavaScript, PowerShell, Windows Command Shell, WMI, and then valid accounts for persistence, privilege escalation, valid accounts as well, access token manipulation. So, you know, fairly standard. So right over here, you can see, you know, this is one example of the references here, or, you know, it can essentially help you understand more about the group, understand how they actually perform their attacks. So I mentioned in the slides that the APT groups and operations spreadsheet, which I'll link to the description section of this video, is a great starting point. So I would highly recommend you take a look at the APT notes GitHub repo, where you can essentially, I'm just going to wait, you can essentially search for groups based on campaigns or attacks. So, you know, if I say Fin 6 right over here, let's see, Fin 7, we have stuff on Fin 7. Let's try some of the other known names. Now we can say Fin 6, okay, nothing there. You can also go through it by year. So this, I see quite a few operations have been performed by this group in 2018. So this one looks interesting, may not be related to Fin 6. Actually, it is. There we are. So Fin 6, and you can see it here. And this I know is quite a good report because I've seen it before. This is by FireEye. So you can see it sort of outlines how they go about targeting organizations, and more importantly, initial access, stuff like this. So that's the first resource. I would also recommend taking a look at cyber campaigns. I don't think works. Actually, I think it works, but the one I would recommend taking a look at is this one here, this GitHub repo here, which is APT Cybercriminal Campaign Collections. So we can just navigate there, and then also the search functionality. So let me just show you this here. Malpede is a great place for malware. We'll probably take a look at it later or at a later point. But there should be a search option here. But there we are. This is APT and Cybercriminals Campaign Collection, where you can now go through it again by year, or you can also just try and search for the stuff you're looking for manually. So in this case, you can see we have the Fin 6 reference here. And this is essentially, you know, publicly available CTI. So we have one here by Trend Micro. And there we are. We have an attack path, or, you know, kill chain, as well as an analysis of the attack. And this is where you can start getting into stuff like the IOCs, stuff like this. But one of the resources which I believe is highlighted in this GitHub repo is APT search. And by the way, I'll put a link to all of these, and these allow you to perform a quick search for a particular APT group. So I can say Fin 6 here, and I can then start finding out, you know, references or, you know, pretty much CTI, you know, on the group to learn more about it. And that's weird. It said there were 5 pages. Search for Fin 6 again, go to page 2. Yeah, so, you know, there's a lot of stuff you can get into. So I would highly recommend you take a look at the APT Notes GitHub repo and this repo right over here. They sort of have links out to some of the other resources that I've already shown you. But with that being said, that's going to be it for this video, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video when we'll be taking a look at the Fin 6 emulation plan. So I'll see you guys there.